Denver Broncos head coach Sean Payton met with his team on Monday following the bye week, and his message was simple: maintain the pace. How can the Broncos do that? We highlight what we learned from Sean Payton and much more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it is your team every day. Thank you so much to all the everydayers and first listeners out there in Broncos Country for tuning into the show however you do. We appreciate you. We have it covered every single day, all year long. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports. You can check out my written work over there, milehighsports.com, as well as joined by Sayre Bedinger, the site expert, predominantlyorange.com, and also a writer over there at NFL Spin Zone. Look, we got a chance to catch up with Broncos head coach Sean Payton on Monday. That's one thing we'll highlight here on today's episode of the show. But, here's what Broncos Country can expect. There's some big contract decisions coming up for this team here in these final 4 games of the season, also going into the offseason. What does that look like? Is Courtland Sutton a candidate for an in-season extension here? Should they look at that? More importantly, what were Sean Payton's thoughts after the bye week? We'll break all that down here on today's episode show, which is brought to you by our friends over there at PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for $50 instantly when you play $5. Sayre, usually coming out of the bye week, I was looking forward to the Monday Zoom press conference here from Sean Payton, and I was hoping that we were going to be able to get to a point to ask some questions about, hey, Sean, what were your thoughts on the evaluation of how to get the run game going in these final 4 games? You're going to see Levi Wallace again. Instead, we didn't get too much here because, to be honest with you, not a lot of people have thought of those questions. You need to figure out about this team in these final 4 weeks. Sean gave us some things, but unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of great questions to be able to open things up.
Yeah, obviously you want to find out a little bit more coming out of the bye week when you have lots of questions, specifically like you mentioned, Cody, with the running game, with how poorly Levi Wallace played and what the plan at corner is going forward. We know that Sean Payton keeps it pretty hush-hush when it comes to the injury department and things like that. But you're right, he did give a few nuggets here or there. I think one of the most interesting things that he pointed out is like, hey, if you could go back and do things differently, what would you do against the Browns? And Sean Payton said what we said after that game. It's like, why was Pat Surtain not covering Jerry Jeudy more in that game than he was? And so you and I have talked about this before, Cody. Obviously, you're never able to get to 100% of the time just having one guy cover a specific player. Like, offenses make it impossible for you to do that. But Sean Payton said at least at least a 60-40 kind of a thing, right? Where you could get Jerry Jeudy matched up against Pat Surtain, your best player defensively, as opposed to continually putting Levi Wallace in bad situations, which ultimately leads to kind of like, the thoughts on Chris Abrams-Drain and how well he responded and things like that. But at this point, obviously, we still don't know, like, what can we expect against the Colts and who's going to play corner? And, what are you going to do about Levi Wallace? Like, is he going to play? Is he going to be in dime? Is he going to be out there starting? Are you going to give him a chance to rebound? Are you going to go with the young guy? Those things are all still mysteries, even after Sean returned to speak with the media.
Yeah, we'll find a way to get maybe Sean Payton to get some insight on that in Wednesday's practice. Obviously, I'll be there for the press conference. We'll see what the vibe is here as the team comes out of their bye week. But in terms of Chris Abrams-Drain, Sean Payton did touch on. He was asked about what he's seen from him in the last couple of months in practice. Obviously, Monday Night Football was his first regular season career game. And so for him, he got thrown in the fire late. But throughout that entire game, he played on special teams in the kicking game. And Sean said that he's done a really good job in practice. He's been a guy that has challenged them a little bit. But more importantly, like when he got on the field on Monday, I think those reps they're proving, like not only just like, hey, you get in on defense, you need to step up in that type of position, but more so like, hey, he jumped into special teams and he played well in those aspects in the kicking game and punt return as a jammer, those are things that you want to see. Like, all right, hey, now with some of the other areas, like what does he offer that maybe a guy like Levi Wallace doesn't? I think primarily the special teams aspect gives him a boost. He's a younger guy, and ironically enough, his first game in his NFL career came against the Indianapolis Colts in the preseason, where we all came away from that game saying, wow, all right, hey, really liking what we're seeing here from Chris Abrams-Drain. So, there is that to kind of highlight and maybe pinpoint where you're at, but I think the game plan is clear. Whoever the Broncos believe is the number 1 receiver for the Colts this week, Pat Surtain will be on that guy primarily a majority of the game. Very curious to see how they maybe change up some of the miscommunication issues that they certainly had there pre-snap on the back end, especially at times when they were blitzing. Seemed like guys didn't know like who to replace in coverage at certain times. So that's going to be a big element to see. But in terms of, Sean Payton was asked the question, what was your message to the team coming out of the bye week? And Sean simply responded like, hey, we met here Monday morning. We just talked about what we need to do. He said, there is no grand message. And really, he said, we just got to keep playing our game. We got to improve, and we got to avoid making mistakes that have been hurting us in the first half of the season. And really what he meant by those mistakes, and he highlighted it, he said penalties have been something that's been killer for us this season. He said, if we don't find a way to minimize the, mistakes in terms of penalties in these final 4 games, it can cost us. And I think that is very, very true. I mean, Sayre, how many times have we seen in the offense, for example, them playing behind the chains a little bit because of a holding penalty, because of a false start? Like, you get a nice run by Audric Estime in one game. It's called back due to unnecessary roughness on Garrett Bowles, in that Falcons game. And then, you get a nice little run here against the Browns on Monday Night Football. It gets called back due to a holding call. It's just like those things right there, positive plays instantly negated and impacted by a negative play. That's something that Sean Payton says, hey, it's the most problematic thing for us. We have to find a way to minimize that in our final 4 games.
Yeah, not just wiping out good running gains as well, Cody, but also kind of just getting a little sloppy on the back end in the secondary, where there's been quite a few penalties this year. And I think that's one of those things that's kind of, okay, you got aggressive guys out there. They want to go make plays on the football, but you've got to be in position. You got to get your head around. You can't get there too early. I thought the Broncos did a good job in key moments of making clean plays against the Browns. But at the same time, I mean, if you're getting called for big downfield penalties, like, it's just playing better technique, playing the ball, that kind of stuff, maybe shifting momentum in an entire game. Like, that's the last thing you need against the Colts, is to be giving away free deep downfield plays. You need to be playing tight coverage. You need to be playing aggressive, but you don't need to be bailing out Anthony Richardson in this offense. But that's kind of really what they do well anyway, is attacking deep downfield and hitting those shot plays. And so the last thing the Broncos need to do in a game like this coming up here on Sunday, Cody, is really just give away free yardage. And that's the thing, like, that's really affected the running game. It's affected, the overall output of the offense, which, even as we've seen them still struggle with penalties, they've been able to improve. But it can be backbreaking at this time of year. And you don't want to be looking back on 1 or 2 games and saying, man, if there hadn't been pass interference here, or man, if they hadn't got holding called here and been backed up to 1st and 20, they would have been in position for a field goal to, in a game that was decided by 2. That's the last thing that you want at the end of the season, is to be looking back at a couple of penalties here and there, sloppy plays, and being like, man, how different could the season have been if this play hadn't happened?
Yeah, and look, I think that there are some things that, like, hey, is it a technique thing? It's coaching up and saying, hey, officials always have like their own different views, right? Like, for example, the back judge may see the offensive lineman kind of pinning like this, but it may look like a hole, and they're going to call it. Unfortunately, there's no review process for it. I will say Denver's just got to be better in that regard, but you just have to avoid that. The penalties have been problematic. And look, I think it's not just a Broncos issue. I think it's a league-wide issue. I don't know Sayre, I don't know how many games we tuned into on Sunday, especially even watching even on Red Zone. How many times have we seen flags just litter the field here in the NFL product the last couple of years? Every game is just, I feel like there's an average of 18 to 20 flags combined in a game. Like, that right there slows down the game, which is what the NFL doesn't want. It becomes a little too frustrating. Here we are. We're nitpicking at this point. But yes, Denver has to be cleaner on the penalty side of things. Some calls that have gone against Denver this year defensively, in terms of some pass interference, have been ticky-tack, been a little subjective there. But they have to get better on the offensive side of the ball. I think that's going to be their biggest key. I'm not worried about the defense. I'm worried about the offense. Especially if they can't get the run game going, you have to find a way to avoid penalties playing behind the sticks, because then that makes it easier for opposing defenses to game plan for you. And how long can Denver sustain that? I don't know. That's the question we're going to have here in these final 4 games of the regular season. But one question we do have here for the Denver Broncos is, could they extend Courtland Sutton either in season or in the offseason? What's the likelihood of that? Well, we talked to NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport, shared some insight on that. We'll share that and much more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at Ice Shaker. And listen up, Locked On Broncos fans, Broncos Country. I know you're like me, and your holiday shopping list is, let's just say, far from complete. I'm in that process right now. If that's the case, I've got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fans that are in your life. Perhaps you've heard of Ice Shaker. Ice Shaker is now the officially licensed product of the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and MLB, and it will make for the ideal gift, whether it be a stocking stuffer or something that is gift wrapped today. Created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers, Ice Shakers have sold over 1 million bottles. They have changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift that you've been looking for. Go to iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% on your order. It's got a patented twist-in agitator that breaks up protein powders and other powders, but it's silent when you shake it instead of the annoying ball sound that it makes. It's also third-party tested. It will hold ice for up to 30+ hours. On top of that, it's fully customizable. Send in your logo and check out their custom shop to customize your favorite bottle. And the turnaround time on custom bottles is 3 to 5 business days. So get yours today. Order your team-branded bottles today at iceshaker.com. and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. Ice Shakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market. That's Ice Shakers. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over there at Prize Picks. And if you love watching a game, you're going to love Prize Picks, especially in the month of December. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. And here's why you need to check it out. You can now win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks this holiday season. And during this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picks Miss, and they're offering 2 free picks in the month of December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out so you can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Now, one thing you can look at is all the wide variety of different games that are going on in the NBA, the NFL. You can do more than or less than in terms of yards. For example, if you want to look at Courtland Sutton, maybe more than 70 yards receiving in store here against the Indianapolis Colts. You can do that inside of Prize Picks because it's quick, simple, and so much fun to challenge myself and my friends. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks. Run your game.
The comeback has been on for Courtland Sutton this year, who looks well on his way to a Pro Bowl campaign, the first one since 2019. But the question is, how much longer will he be a Denver Bronco beyond this year? The discussion has shifted from could Courtland Sutton be traded to Courtland Sutton holding out, getting his contract reworked. Broncos Country, we're going to be talking about whether or not the team's going to keep Courtland Sutton, who appears to be Bo Nix's favorite target here in 2024, as well as a number of his other teammates. But Broncos Country, thanks so much for rocking with Cody and I every single day here at Locked On Broncos. We appreciate you so much, especially all of you everydayers out there that make Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. If you haven't already done so, hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Cody, let's break this down because Courtland Sutton has obviously, I would say, exceeded expectations this year, especially based on the way the year started. He leads the team in receiving, obviously, but he's kind of become a force the last handful of weeks here. I mean, he's really dominating the target share. He's making plays. He's making clutch plays on third down in the red zone. The chemistry is there between he and Bo Nix. We know the Broncos have messed with his contract a couple of times this year, which raises questions about his future with the team, because you load things up into next year to kind of set yourself up in order to cut, trade, do whatever with 1 year left on the deal. Do you think there's a chance Courtland Sutton gets extended by the Denver Broncos at this point?
I think there's a good chance. Last week, I had a chance to jump on with Dave Logan and Ryan Edwards of KOA Sports and host with them for 3 hours. And we had Ian Rappaport on. And one of the questions I asked Ian was, with the chemistry and what we've seen as of late with Courtland Sutton, we all know they redid his deal in the offseason. A lot of it was incentive laden there. Could we see an extension with the Broncos and Courtland Sutton? And the one thing that Ian said is he can see it happening here, and he believes it could more than likely happen based on the chemistry we've seen with him and Bo Nix. There's, obviously some influence on Sutton's side. He wants to stay in Denver. He's become Bo Nix's #1 target so far this season. and Denver's heading in a really good direction. He said one thing that also stood out. He said the Broncos over the last 3 years, they have had, I mean, handfuls of opportunities to trade away Courtland Sutton, where teams made offers for a third-round pick, where teams made different offers, like aggressive offers, say, hey, we'll take Courtland. The Broncos have not budged on that. Sean Payton has not budged on that, which I think is very, very, I'd say, a promising development at this point. I think more so now as we're seeing the offense evolve and Courtland Sutton's role start to amplify a little bit more, he has truly become the security blanket here in this offense for Bo Nix. He's got 63 catches on the year on 104 targets. 44 of his 63 catches this season, Sayre, have been for a first down. So chain movers. You mentioned, obviously, third down. That's been a growing trend we've seen from these guys in the last handful of weeks. And that's where you're going to need other younger guys to start stepping up, because teams, I imagine, are going to start allocating different resources against Courtland Sutton here. And I think if you have a run game that's effective, I think that Denver's going to find a way to maybe take some shots here with Courtland in the second half stretch here. But the one thing we also want to talk about as well, passer rating for Bo Nix when looking Courtland Sutton's way is 90.5. Good things are happening. And that number has grown, obviously, since the beginning part of the season here. I just think you look at the impact of Courtland. He's the number one receiver in terms of overall snaps played, targets, volume, production. He is their guy. And look, another thing I would say is promising in between the connection errors, like Courtland Sutton's obviously having one of his better years of his NFL career. Back in 2019, he had his first career 1,000-yard receiving season. I think he had 1,100 that year. Right now, he's at 846 yards receiving. He's well on pace to surpass that, to hit 1,000 yards this season. He could do it in the next 2 games if he continues on the trend that he's had here. But I'd also say at this point, too, just the value in which he's kind of grown here. And I think he's evolved a little bit more. Like when I'm watching the film, so the thing I see about Courtland is how I think he's evolved as a route runner, right? I don't think it's talked about enough here. A lot of people say, oh, he's just the 60-40 jump ball guy. Courtland has done a really good job moving around, not just on the outside, but as the inside number 2 receiver, as the inside number 3 receiver, and his route tree has expanded exponentially. He's knowing how to attack different coverages, and now he's got a quarterback that can get him the football consistently. I think that's game-changing. I think that amplifies the volume in terms of the magnitude of, like, this is why Courtland Sutton is valuable here to Sean Payton. You can add other playmakers, obviously, in the offseason, but Courtland has, I'd say, significant value here to Bo Nix and this offense going forward. I think they should absolutely extend him.
And here's the sticky part of this situation, right? Is like, okay, what's his cap situation in 2025? Well, he counts over 20 million on next year's salary cap. So instantly your thought goes to, well, the Broncos could probably save a lot of money by cutting him. Well, not so fast on that one, because Courtland only would save the Broncos about 6-7 million if they would cut him before June 1. If they make him a post June 1 cut designation, then it would save them a little, over 13 million on the salary cap. But again, that would be post June 1 that you would see those savings. So you wouldn't even be able to utilize that savings in regular free agency. So you're in a situation here where cutting Courtland Sutton before free agency and all that stuff, it saves you minimally. You're eating over 13 million in dead cap, with already having Russell Wilson accounting for 35 million in dead cap money. And to me, Cody, that's just a terrible use of such a significant chunk of the salary cap pie. I'd much rather have Courtland Sutton back on a renewed contract, or even at his current deal, where the Broncos, they still are very flush with cap space next offseason. Like, they're top 10 in the NFL in overall cap space, with Courtland accounting for 20 plus million on the cap. So just imagine Courtland gets a contract extension, 2-3 years, give him some more guaranteed money, this, that, and the other, a contract that runs through his age 32 season, something like that. And you get cap relief that way. That's how you get cap relief. In a lot of situations in today's NFL is you extend guys, get that cap hit down, and push the money forward into future years. And I think we will see the Broncos try to do that, because Courtland's become such a valuable piece to this team. And like you mentioned, I think if they'd maybe thought about trading him, if they'd been like, you know what, yeah, we could live without him, but the offer's not good enough. That doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be the opposite. That seems to be like, we can't live without this guy. And therefore, I think you have to find a way to keep him around.
Yeah, they don't want to move on from him. They really like what he's done. He's a good leader inside that locker room, specifically for those younger receivers. I mean, I talked to guys like Troy Franklin, talked to Devon Bailey. I mean, even talked to other guys in the past that were on the roster, like Jalen Virgin. Like Courtland has been so valuable to us. Like his leadership presence for the team is very big right now. And I'll even say too, you look at free agency, like guys like Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin. We all know T. Higgins. They're all going to be available. Mari Cooper, but T. Higgins is going to probably command a large market deal. At this point, you look at Keenan Allen. Is he going to leave Chicago after the season? There's a possibility there, but what's he going to bring to Denver right now? I don't know. That could still be something in the works for Denver, but you can't just move on from a guy like Courtland Sutton and then just maybe think like, okay, we can replace him with one of these guys when that's probably not going to be the likely factor. Like you need a guy like Courtland Sutton. He's proven to be valuable. And also for a guy like Chris Godwin, who I know a lot of Broncos fans really, really want, he's likely going to return to Tampa Bay. He loves it there. I know they've been banged up with injuries this year, but if that wasn't the case, it'd be a very scary team. And I think they're looking forward to building something special down there in Tampa Bay. So the solution is to continue to develop and progress with your younger guys. We even talked about on yesterday's episode show, maybe A.T. Perry's in line for some more run here in 2025, but Courtland Sutton, you need him. And I think the Broncos are going to find a way to keep him part of the mix, especially if it means Bo Nix is going to continue his ascension with Courtland Sutton. That obviously has been the case here. But Broncos Country, we're also going to play another game here on today's episode of the show. We're going to take a look at some of the bigger contract decisions that are looming here for the Broncos. Which players could be in-season candidate extensions, or who's going to have to wait until the offseason? We'll break that down much more here on today's episode. Locked On Broncos. Broncos Country, today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. And as you'll know, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. In Week 15 of the NFL season, yes, Week 15. It's been that long, and it's already here that quickly here. But the Broncos, they're going to host the Indianapolis Colts here in Week 15, and they open up as 4.5-point home favorites against the Colts, who are looking to maybe try to play spoils of the Broncos' postseason ambitions. If you think the Broncos are going to win on the money line, well, you can get in on FanDuel.com because right now they have a great new offer for new customers here where you can bet $5 and you can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch during the course of a game, you can check out the latest stats and trends. You can view live play-by-play on the same exact page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. It's time for the fourth quarter here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. I want to say thanks once again to all the everydayers and first listeners out there in Broncos Country. We got you covered every single day, all year long. There's never an offseason for the true fan, but right now the Broncos, they're not focused on the offseason. We are a little bit forward thinking here as it comes to some of the contract extensions, decisions coming up here with this team. Several key Broncos set to become free agents, Sayre, and obviously there are some in-season extension candidates here. I think a lot of people have kind of asked the question, can the Broncos extend Nick Bonitto during the regular season right now? They cannot because he obviously was drafted. They can do it after the season, right? After his third season has concluded, that's when it opens up. They can't do it in the middle of his third season, though. Your thoughts on Nick Bonitto? I mean, obviously he's going to get a contract extension. With the way that he's playing 2 years in a row and now he's ascending into a potential defensive player of the year candidate, you're going to want to take care of him sooner rather than later as the price, as we talk about pass rushers, it may go up.
Absolutely. The price is going to only continue to rise and rise when it comes to pass rushers in the NFL. That's one of the most valuable positions in the game today. And Nick Bonitto, he's producing, Cody. And I feel like, the Broncos have set themselves up to really be able to make him a focal point in the defense. Now, the question is, do you buy in after year 3 or do you wait till after year 4 when, you would be really risking? You'd have to put the franchise tag in play, things like that. Market value, is it going to go up and up and up? Most likely as the salary cap continues to rise, right? So it's one of those discussions that's similar in this offseason as, the likes of Quinn Miners and Jonathan Cooper and things like that. It's or is Bonitto on tier with, a Pat Surtain in terms of his value to this defense? I know that Pat Surtain is obviously the best corner in the game, and he's proven that over a longer period of time. This is Bonitto's breakout, kind of like breakout into stardom season. He had a good year productivity wise last year. But as you can see here, I'm buying in, Cody. I'm all in on the Nick Bonito hype train. I'm ready to go. And I think the Broncos will be as well. I think that they'll be willing to get to the negotiating table this offseason and make him one of the highest paid players on this team.
Well, I think one of the obstacles is like, okay, what does your salary cap look like? I think it's going to be in a better position because Denver did take care of some of those extensions. You talk about a lower cap hit, obviously on the first year of that deal. Some guys' deals aren't even entering their first year of the deal just yet. So that's also good news here for Denver. But you look at some of the other guys that are going to be unrestricted free agents here. Garrett Bowles is one of them. Obviously, we'll talk about him. DJ Jones, another valuable player. Look at that. Other guys on the defensive side of the ball. Justin Sternad, who's starting at linebacker right now, is proven to be valuable. He'll be a free agent. I think the bigger question here's when I look at this too, right? We're going to add quarterbacks into it. Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham, the backup quarterbacks for Denver right now, they're also going to be free agents. When it comes to priority here, I think you have to look at the conversation here with Garrett Bowles and I think DJ Jones primarily. For me, Garrett, I think, is proven to be valuable here to what the Broncos want to do. Physically, he still has, I think, that traits and attributes that are going to help you win games. I think it's a huge gamble to maybe move on from Garrett and say, all right, that's it. Garrett, thank you for everything in your Broncos career. Now you're going to go elsewhere here. And then let's say Denver drafted a rookie offensive tackle. Going into, I think, Bo Nix's second year with a rookie offensive tackle on the left side, unless it's a true blue chip, blue collar prospect, man, that's a gamble. That's a risk. And also it's like, are you going to make Mike McGlinchey switch from right tackle to left tackle and then play Alex Palczewski at right tackle? Well, then what does the depth behind those guys look like if there's an injury? So for me, it's a multifaceted problem. I think you got to bring back Garrett Bowles. I think you absolutely have to find a way to bring back DJ Jones as well. When it comes to these two players, are you yay or nay on them coming back?
I think with Garrett Bowles, I would definitely be open to having him back. We know that Bowles was older when he was drafted back in 2017. So that does kind of complicate the discussion just a little bit in terms of, okay, you're starting to look down the road for a contract extension that you're giving. How many years, how much guaranteed money is going on that? Would Bowles be willing to, say yes to a short-term extension with, the first 2 years, basically guaranteed. And then beyond that, you kind of get to play wait and see type of game. Is he going to be willing to do that? I think you definitely have to make an offer if you're the Denver Broncos because you have other fish to fry in the NFL draft, quite frankly. I would love to see the team finally draft another offensive tackle to develop behind Bowles and McGlinchey because both of those guys are north of 30. And so you need to have somebody waiting in the wings. And I think Palczewski could maybe be that guy on the right side. But then I would love to see the Broncos draft somebody that could eventually be a starter at left tackle or left guard. As we know, versatility is so crucial in these prospects coming out. But at that point, it would allow you two years, from now, some second or third round pick could come in and say, hey, I could be your starter at this point, for either Bowles or Ben Powers and replace one of those two guys. So you kind of just get into this long-term game of playing there. With DJ Jones, Cody, he plays less than 45% of the snaps most of the time. Can you replace his production with somebody else? He does make a few plays every game, it feels like, where he's pushing the pocket, where he's creating opportunities for other guys, but the TFL numbers aren't what they were in San Francisco. I know that's not the end-all be-all. He was never a big sack guy when he was with the 49ers. That's continued in Denver. So he's getting paid an average of $10 million per year on his current deal. I feel like you could get the production that he brings at a much lower price tag than what we have right now.
I just don't see who that guy is going to be. Look, I think Malcolm Roach, like obviously if you moved on from DJ, that means Malcolm Roach is the starter, but who's coming in from behind Malcolm Roach? Right now I'd say the one thing I see is when DJ Jones goes out, Malcolm Roach comes in and you maintain the same level of production. There's no drop off, right? I don't think Denver has a guy on the roster right now that can do that. Like if it was just Malcolm and he has to come out for a breather because he's not an every down guy, I don't think Denver's got that guy. I don't think that's Inyoma Uwazurike. I don't think they have that guy on the roster right now. So that I think is maybe the challenge of that. I want to ask you this as well. Like if you had to choose to extend either not extend, but essentially re-sign Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson to be the backup, who would it be at this point? I'm going to go with Zach Wilson. I think for what Payton is looking for, he's got some things that maybe he's like, all right, hey, I like these from the athleticism standpoint. You talk about the arm when you talk about you needing a guy to be a good backup for you. I think Zach Wilson can be that guy.
Yeah, I think so too. The upside is definitely there with Zach Wilson, as we've seen with so many other quarterbacks nowadays that are having revivals later in their careers, or they've got the bust label after 4 or 5 years with a certain team, and then they play well for somebody else. It's coaching matters, situation matters. I think the Broncos situation is only going to continue to get better, and as Zach Wilson continues to develop his craft under Sean Payton, Davis Webb, all these coaches in Denver, I think his value is going to skyrocket. Sean Payton said it. We want to make this guy millions, whether in Denver or somewhere else. I think he'll be well paid in Denver for another year, and then he'll get a contract offer somewhere else in 2026. But I would bring back Zach Wilson for sure.
We'll get to our ERFA standpoint here. Lucas Kroll, Jaquan McMillan, Jordan Jackson, and Devin Key are all players who are ERFAs. Key will be back, I believe, because of his value on special teams. He's developing as a safety. Jordan Jackson, they love the progress they've seen from him. But I think it's pretty clear that if anyone's going to get a bag out of anybody in this group, it's going to be Jaquan McMillan for what he's been able to do inside the nickel.
Absolutely. And using that, benefit of the team controlled contract, the ERFA status, the Broncos will likely tender him, make sure that they bring him back at as low a price as they can for as long as they can, and extend that out. Eventually you take care of your guys who are producing at the highest level, obviously, but it's a no-brainer to extend a guy like him an offer to come back and to keep as much of this band together, because these guys have galvanized, Cody, and they're playing some good football. Got the Broncos on the cusp of making the playoffs here in 2024.
That they do. In Broncos Country, want to know your thoughts. If you've taken a look at the 2025 NFL free agency picture here for the Broncos in-house, what decisions would you make surrounding Garrett Bowles, DJ Jones, the backup quarterback job maybe going into 2025? And, of course, would you extend Jaquan McMillan, Courtland Sutton? We want to hear from you, Broncos Country, as always here on the show. Thank you to all the everydayers for making us your first listen of the day. Sayre and I, we're going to have you covered this week. He's going to sit down with the Locked On Colts guys for a crossover preview. We'll have our in-depth game preview as well, plus news and notes of what we get coming out of practice on Wednesday in Del Valle. On top of that, the AFC Squad Show, you're going to get that as well. It's a jam-packed week over here on the Locked On Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.